In this video, I'll be showing you some variable naming convention. These are basic rules that you need to follow when giving your variable names. So I'm just going to read through this table. So the first thing to take into account is that variable names cannot start with numerical. For example, you can't use a number. You can't name a variable 3x or 4 cars. Just for example, those would be illegal variable names. However, you can combine the numbers with text. You can call a variable maybe cars 4 or go for it and things like that. They are perfect, valid variable name. You cannot use operators. Operators, I mean either mathematical or logical operators. You can't use that in variable names. For example, you can't call a variable this plus that, or this minus that, or this times that. You can't do that. You cannot use any punctuation marks of any kind in a JavaScript variable name other than the underscore. So you can't call your variable car colon or car hash, but you can use an underscore. Underscore is allowed, so you can give your variable name underscore car, for example, or something underscore something or thing. That is allowed. JavaScript variable names must never contain spaces. Never. For example, you can't name your variable my car space car. That's not allowed. However, you can give it my car. That is legal. There cannot be any spaces between variable names. Variable names are case sensitive. For example, if you declare a variable called my car, it's different from a variable called my car or my car. They are all different variations. So when you're declaring variable names, you've got to be careful the case you use, so that when you want to refer to that variable name, you are referencing the correct variable. It's like having the key to the wrong door. If you don't have the right key, you will not be able to open the door. So you must make sure you have your variable names correct in the correct case. Finally, you cannot use any JavaScript keywords. Keywords are parts of the JavaScript language itself. You can't use any of that for variable names. For example, window is a keyword in JavaScript. It's part of the language. Things like open is part of the language. Location or string, those are all part of the JavaScript language, so it will be illegal to use them on their own. However, you can use them in combination with other things, other keywords. For example, you can call a variable that window, or maybe my string, or whatever. You can combine them with other text. That is acceptable. So these are just some key basic rules you need to take into consideration when you are giving your variable names. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. JavaScript data types. In programming in general, and also in JavaScript, the data types basically refers to the classification that specifies the type of value that a variable has or stores. There are different types of data types in JavaScript. Here's a basic table with some basic JavaScript data types. So I'm going to start with the top one, which is a string. A string basically is a sequence of text that must be enclosed in quotes. You can use either single quotes or double quotes, but you cannot mix the quotes. For example, here you can declare a variable called my data and set it to this value. You can see I've got quotes around it. I've got my web console open. So the way to access your web console, if you are on a Windows computer, open up just Google homepage and type in Ctrl Shift and J on your keyboard. or F12, and that will give you access to the web console. If you are on a Mac, you do Command, Shift, and J. That will give you access to the console. So let's create a simple variable that will store a string data type. So in my console, I'm going to create a new variable by typing in the keyword var, and I'm going to call this variable my colors. Okay, and I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to give this value of red. So that's the value. You can see I've enclosed the value in quotes, which means it's a string data type. The computer will recognize that as a string data type. So if I want to reference this variable, all I need to do is call it by its name, and it will just return the value red. So that's a simple example of how a string data type can be used. The next data type I want to mention is the number data type. Basically, it refers to any numerical value, and it does not need to have a quote around its value. So let me illustrate by creating a simple variable that will store a number data type. So I'll declare a simple variable by typing in the keyword var, and I'll call this variable door number, and I'll give it a value of 7. So this is known as a number data type. You can see it doesn't need quotes around it. So if I want to reference that variable, I just call it by its name, number, and it will return a value of 7. The next data type I want to mention is called a Boolean. A Boolean basically represents two values. One can be true, the other can be false. And when you're using Boolean values, no quotes required. To illustrate a Boolean value, I'm just going to compare two values. I'm going to say 4 is greater than 3. That will return true. And if I say 3 is greater than 4, and that will return false. So that's basically how Boolean value data types work. The next data type I want to mention is called an array. An array is a data structure that stores multiple values as one single reference. Basically, what that means, a variable can store only one value, but with an array, you can store multiple values as one single reference. You can see here, I've got two values here, Ford and Toyota, but I'm referencing it under one variable called my cars. So let me show you a quick illustration inside the console. So I'm going to declare a variable called my cars, and I'm going to set it to equals 2, and this is how you declare an array with square brackets, and inside the square brackets is where you place the values. So let's say the first value, I say it's a Ford, and second value I say is a Toyota. When you are using arrays, you separate each of the values with a comma, but the only where you don't need a comma is the very last value. So this basically here is an array, and the way you access the values in an array is via their index. So the way an array is referenced is by their index. So this will be known as a 0 index. This will be 1. If you have several, you can have as many as possible inside the square brackets, but you need to separate the values with a comma, and if they are of a string data type, you enclose it in quotes. If they are not, then you don't need to enclose it in quotes. So for example, if I wanted to access value number 1, this is 0, index 0, which is Ford. All I need to do is type in my cars, and in lowercase, type in my cars, and then in square brackets, I type in value 0, which will represent the index I'm trying to target, and that should return, you can see it has returned Ford. So that's how you, if I had like 20 inside here, I will reference it by the index based number. So Ford, the very first value is a 0 index, Toyota will be index number 1, and so on. So that's how you access the values in an array. So the key difference between an array and variable is that an array can store multiple values as one value. If you see here, I've just got this variable called my colors, and it's only stored one value. Here I've got a variable called my cars, and it stores multiple values but referenced as a single value is called my cars. The next data type I want to quickly mention is called the object. Everything in JavaScript is basically an object. So all the examples I've shown so far, they are basically objects. You can also represent JavaScript objects with curly braces, as I've done here. I've declared a variable called person and set the value to equals to the first name, got John, last name, Doe. So you can represent an object like this way as well, but by using curly braces. So if I wanted to access this object here, all I need to do is call the variable by its name, and it will return you can see it's returned the first name as John, last name as Doe. Another data type I want to introduce you to is called null. You may come across this in your learning with JavaScript, and basically a null data type is something that does not exist. You can also use the null data type to empty the value of a variable, and a null is also an object data type. So you can see here I've got a variable here called door number and with a value of 7. So I can empty that value by just typing in the name of the variable, which is dot number, and setting the value to null, and that will empty the current data it stores. So if I call this variable called door number now, it will come back saying null because I've emptied out the whatever it was storing. Okay, so a null data type means basically nothing. It doesn't store anything. There's nothing in there. The final data type I want to talk about is called undefined. Undefined is similar to null. The only difference is that they are different data type. Undefined is undefined, while a null data type is also an object data type. So if you declare a variable and you don't give it a value, that will become undefined. For example, if I come here and say variable sweets and I don't give it any value, that will become undefined. If I try to call it by its name, it will come back undefined. So that's the key difference. Key difference between a null and undefined is that undefined is not an object data type, while null is an object data type. So that's basically it for this video on JavaScript data types. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.